So welcome. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on building a robust cybersecurity defense. I really appreciate you taking your time, and it's my intention that you get value out of this. And there's a lot of content that I'll be going over. At the end, there'll be some QA time, and I'll give you an email address. So if you wanted to reach out to me and get clarification on some of the information, we will be publishing this also. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Randy Heischiver. I'm the IT director at Echo Technology Solutions. I've been with Echo for about 6 years now, and I've been in the industry for many years beyond that in the information technology space, and been working with service delivery and support of IT services. And Echo is a full service IT consulting firm. Some would refer to us as a MSP, or a managed service provider. We provide service desk, network support, professional services, project work. We also have a software Salesforce integration development practice. And if you're a small company or medium-sized company, we would be your IT outsourcing firm that you would be able to use for your IT department. Let me go ahead and give you an idea of what we're going to be covering today. And the agenda we'll go over, we'll look at some of the new threats that are now upon us, especially with the remote migration and moving off of the office for the last year. I'll be working on an analogy that I put together using a home and who left the windows open to give us some ideas of the vulnerabilities that are in play, both in a premise office environment and also at home. I'll look with you and we'll talk about and drill in on the best practices for protecting the perimeter, especially the cloud environment that we're all working in these days and working from a remote operation. We'll look at how the people are part of the weakest link in the vulnerabilities and some of the things you can do to close that gap. How to protect and manage your devices that are being used by your employees, ways of controlling and managing the application access that we're issuing to our employees for the cloud apps specifically, and being prepared for the worst and hoping for the best, and ways to make sure that you're covering yourself in that way. And looking at some of the risk management things that you might want to be doing to help improve your security posturing. And then we'll open up the QA at the end. I do have the QA in the chats at the bottom if you want to start putting something out throughout the presentation. If I don't get to it, I'll make sure that it either gets sent to you or posted, and you could always reach out to the email address at the end if you needed to, like I said, get clarification or want to follow up on something. So let's go ahead and dive in here. So the new threats. What is really at the heart of the new threats right now, specifically working from home, is one of the big ones. We've always been protecting ourselves at the office. Now we're all home. So there's a lot more things that are going on with that, and we'll drill in on that more as we talk about it. The workforce is, virtual now. We're remote. We're working anywhere at any time. We need to be able to support that now going forward. And, there's issued equipment that has been issued by the office, but now we're also bringing our own devices. We're bringing our own office, our own home printers, our own home computers, our own networks, our phones, etc. And because we're working at home, everybody has now shifted probably the hours that they're working. So we're now needing to support more of a 24/7 operation. With this move over the last year, a lot of companies have not updated their policies. So then now you have a work at home policy that might need to be enhanced or more comprehensive. Excuse me. Policies it's hard to enforce them. And now with the remote workforce, how do you enforce that? So something to consider. The home infrastructures, like I mentioned earlier, they're now in the mix. They're consumer grade products. They're not industrial strength that businesses typically would buy. We don't know how old they are. We don't know if they're protected. We don't know what, the end of lives are, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got a lot of Internet of Things that are now coming into play, a lot of smart devices. We've got cameras, we've got things at home, we have Alexa, we have a lot of things that are now being brought into the mix that now needs to be taken into account when we look at our protections. There's been a lot of zero-day attacks. So these are those attacks that just show up one day, and a lot of the software companies weren't aware of it. The antivirus softwares aren't aware of it. And we need to be aware and making sure that we've got protections to address that. So also in social engineering, the scams, the trickery, the ways that are being, phishing attacks, things that are being played out to help exploit our vulnerabilities, and we have to be more cognizant of that. Cyber warfare, our international adversaries that are looking to, attack us, cripple us. The whole thing with the voting and with, the different infrastructures, getting ahead, intellectual property is being stolen. So we have to be careful of that. We now are sharing environments with our families. So there's a lot more different types of players or actors involved. You got your kids involved. They're downloading software. They're playing games. You don't know what's being put on your computers. So there's a lot of things that are now at play in that regard. And we've got a whole new lifestyle of being online, social media, a lot more contents out there, a lot more exposure. So all this is the new kind of environment that we're working in, and we need to be aware of it as we continue to improve our cybersecurity posture. So from a analogy of a home and where we are, or even an office, where we have our people and our devices and our applications and data in the past has been protected by some sort of fence around that, an office building, a firewall. At home, it might be the lock on the door, the windows closed, the yard with a fence, a gate, et cetera, et cetera. But as we know, if you leave a window open, you leave a door open, someone leaves a password on a desk, someone leaves a port open on a firewall, somebody forgets to, change something, somebody leaves the building and they don't come back, but you didn't remove them from the access. It creates a vulnerability that we have to be aware of. Now that we've moved to this remote operation, we've got a bigger perimeter that we've got to protect. It's not just this one building or this multiple building operation or this house. It's everywhere, so it's virtual. So with that, let's kind of look at how we can strengthen that perimeter. So today, there's a lot of software that's on the market. And when you're looking at how to protect a virtual environment or remote operation that's accessing all your cloud resources, you've got to start looking at what can be provided from a service provider that will help protect you. We've been putting antivirus on the computers. We have the firewall in our home with the routers, but when we go out into the internet, it's not protected. So we want to start looking at these SASE products or these SASE platforms, Secured Access Services Edge. So these are the services that are now available on the edge to help protect us. In some ways, it's a married with some of the things that have been around, like software-defined wide area network or SD-WAN, which has been in play for a few years now, that helps with the optimization of our internet traffic between our office and our branches, our offices and our offices, and then also now available for our homes to being able to get to the resources in a more optimal way, a more efficient way. And marrying that with these SASE solutions, you can start bringing virtual private network to the solution, which we have in the past connected to an office through a VPN, which is a secured tunnel to the office. So then you access all the resources on the office, but now we're accessing the resources in the cloud. So virtual private networks will help with the privacy protections, ensuring that our traffic between our computer and the resources are being encrypted. And there's more protection on that in a privacy standpoint. Also, zero trust. You might have heard that coined term going around these days. Never trust, always verify. So all traffic should always be verified. It's like you go into an application, it logs in, it's always verifying you. And what happens with the zero trust infrastructure is you're starting to have more controls wrapped around the activity of your engagement with these cloud apps. And the software-defined perimeter will start to build those rules that will ensure that you're the right person accessing that destination or that cloud app. And you could have rules that also say that device is also required to be permissioned. So you can permission a user, you can permission a device, and you can add that to the rules that this particular application is only allowed to be accessed by this group on this device. And then with firewalls as a service, we're used to the firewall at the office that has a very robust rule set that's ensuring the inbound and outbound traffic is proper. There's no unusual behavior on it. There's certain rules that are watching for certain activity that is not allowed. Certain ports are blocked, so you can't get access to certain things in the office. Well, firewall as a service is now available in these SASE platforms. So the firewall becomes something in the cloud. So all your traffic goes through that service and back and forth between you and your services. So you can now start to interrogate for any intrusions, any behavior that is concerning that can be blocked. In addition, DNS security is important because you want to make sure you're going off the domains, either through a browser or through some sort of access that is a legitimate domain that has not been blacklisted and not malicious. And the services will offer these abilities to make sure that you're going off the safe domains when you're either configuring it or logging it in or entering it into your browser. Data loss protection, DLP, you might have heard about this for years. So it's also being included in these platforms in order to provide a monitoring of data that's leaving and heading external from the source. So if it's a file system or if it's an email and you've got a credential or password or a credit card or something that's confidential that is being transmitted, you can build rules into these DLP systems that say that's not allowed, or I need to have that authorized by some compliance officer, or I just want to be notified that it's happening. So you can start to have more controls around what data is exiting or going external. And then more threat protection in these platforms will allow for more inspection of the packets so that you can see if there's something in there that is suspicious. So, more than just a malicious file like an antivirus, but something that can look at log files, can start to see behavior going on between the traffic, and then can be able to notify a team or even take be responding in some fashion to be able to address the issue. So the SASE platforms are something to seriously look at to close the gap on this virtual perimeter. And there are a lot of products on the market. You can just do SASE, look up on Google, and you'll get a bunch of hits on that. And you could also send me an email if you'd like me to recommend some. Ensuring the people. So it's important that your people are aware of the vulnerabilities, the risks, the best practices, things to be looking out for from a phishing campaign that might be coming in, the bad URLs, the bad addresses, attachments. There are some common things that are in this kind of scheme of tricking people that if you keep your people in a training on a regular basis, either be, once a year or twice a year, it just keeps them more alert. So they're not so taken off and surprised or, off guard. And that's what they're trying to exploit is when people get, complacent and they're not paying attention. So you want to keep that fresh in their minds. You want to do attacks. You want to have, a phishing campaign that actually attacks your staff. And you can do that through some of the services, and you can actually find out who your weakest links are. And then you can do more training with those people. And then password fatigue is a common one right now because a lot of folks will just use the same password on every app. So you want to be more rigorous around that and start to enforce that through your policies to use unique passwords for every cloud app. So if anything ever gets in trouble, they don't just start using it across the board for the other applications. And you want to use a complex password with a number of alphanumeric, upper lowercase, and a symbol. And then you want to also add multi-factor authentication and two-factor on top of that. So that's just another layer. But the people you need to address here. Email security threat protection is a useful product where you can put a service provider into the mix between your email system and your users so that all the email traffic goes through this gateway first and checks for bad URLs, checks for impersonations, checks for bad attachments, and also some more spamming filters. And these gateways are really great. Mimecast is one that comes to mind that's really a great solution, and that will help mitigate some of the risks that are playing out with email phishing attacks and bad emails that are coming to your folks. And then always make sure they're using secure channels when they're sending confidential information. Don't send passwords through email. Find ways to do it through maybe a text or through a Slack or through some encrypted channel. So protecting and managing your devices, it's important that now that your devices are probably no longer in the office like they used to, and they're all at the homes and they're all out remote, you need to have more controls of those devices. You need to make sure they're being patched. You need to make sure that they're being backed up. You need to make sure that they're getting applications correctly. You need to make sure that you find them when you need them, that you can shut them down, you can lock them, you can manage them. There's a lot of things that you can't do now with that, you know, with the new norm. So mobile device management is going to be an important thing to start considering putting in play if you haven't, and budgeting it into your future plan so that you can have more of these policies that can be enforceable through those tools. You can deploy your apps easily. You can, you know, set certain requirements for your passwords, complexity requirements, et cetera, et cetera. And if these devices are remote outside of, you know, they're traveling a lot, they're going into cafes, they're going on traveling trips in the airports, and you want to protect them from being stolen or left somewhere, you want to encrypt those drives. So have your IT personnel or whoever you does your IT encrypt those drives so that if the computer is stolen, they won't be able to get into the data. So controlling the apps, it's important to, you know, have ways of ensuring, like I said before, that the applications that are being accessed are properly accessed by the people you want them to access them, that you have multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication activated so that you can, it takes more than just a username and a password to get into your cloud apps. So a lot of the cloud apps have that built in. You want to enable that. You want to have an identity management platform. If you're not, a lot of people have been using Active Directory for all the years in the past, but you can use something like an Okta platform, Microsoft platform, something that will allow for you to manage the identity, be able to group the users, and be able to give them access to those particular applications. And then the single sign-on aspects of these products, either the SASE platform or an Okta platform, will allow for that password fatigue to be addressed so that you can use complex passwords. You can start building in the multi-factor authentication into the products, and you can start making it easier for your team to get access to the applications. And when you onboard and offboard, it's going to be much easier, so you don't have the manual exercise of doing that, and these tools will allow for you to automate that. And then the one part of the single sign-on is an API for integrating cloud to cloud, which is using a SAML, which is a secured assertion markup language. That's going to allow for you to have a more robust binding relationship or trusted relationship between like a Google and an Okta or a Microsoft and an Okta. And it'll allow for you to prevent the users going directly to those cloud apps. And they are required, once the SAML is enabled with the features, they would have to go through this Okta or this single sign-on platform, and that will help enforce the security and protect you better. So being prepared for the worst. I mean, you really want to make sure that you've got a good backup and restore services in play. You know, verify that your cloud apps are backing up. How often are they backing up? How much retention are you getting? What are your compliance requirements? How far back do you have to be recovered from? Make sure you've got that in play. Don't take it for granted. And then, have you done a fire drill? Have you actually restored from these systems? Do you know that they're in play? Especially if you have premise-based systems still in play, or you're hosting a server, you don't want to assume your backups are working unless you put some sort of drill in play, and do that like every, either every month or every 3 months. just do it often. Look at your redundancies. You know, can you survive a breakdown? Do you have multiple ISPs? Does the person working from home have a service level agreement with your constituents, with your clients that require an uptime? And do they have the solutions to be able to be redundant? Do you have backups, you know, with other people covering them? So from the home standpoint, you could put in 2 ISPs. From the office standpoint, make sure you have your 2 ISPs, make sure your devices from your networks can be recovered quickly, and you have a methodology for that turnaround time. Disaster recovery and business continuity plans, you might have them all, but it's time to revisit them with this change, with this new norm. Make sure you've addressed and closed the gap on some of the adjustments that are in play right now. So I put that on there for that purpose. So the final area here before I'll open it up to some questions, and I've got a few minutes left here, is risk management. So, you know, this is really, how do you mitigate, you know, what your current state is right now from being, you know, either exploited, a breach, vulnerable. You want to make sure you have an onboarding and offboarding process for your employees. They come on, they get allocated and access, they give access rights to all these services, and you've got them, you know, in the right groups, and then they either are leaving at some point or they're changing their job, and you're able to offboard them quickly and move them into, either remove them quickly and not have it lingered because a manual exercise is required. And you want to start looking at, you know, ways of automating that. These single sign-on platforms have a lot of capability of provisioning and deprovisioning license accounts and locking down with an identity management system so that when you take a user off, all their services are shut down. From an incident response and escalation, you want to make sure that if you do have a breach, there is some security incident, something that would cause more pain and cost to the company. Could be reputation, it could be cost, it could be you know, productivity. You want to make sure that you've got protocols in play, that people know how to respond, where they need to go, who they need to communicate with, and what is the exercise to play out from that point forward, so that there's no confusion and people are not spinning their wheels and they're not, you know, informing clients about something that might be, you know, a reputational issue and could impact your client reputation. So key policies, just make sure that your password policies are complex and you've got them, you know, maybe you're changing them every 90 days, 180 days, that you're building your access with groups so that it's easy to put people in groups and remove them instead of being granular at the individual level, and that you've got this remote policy being more comprehensive as it becomes the new norm. And then from a security assessment standpoint, it's always a good practice to do some sort of assessment to just see what your current state is, where you want to make some improvements, what are the recommendations, so you can build it into your budget going forward. And you can, you know, if you have a premise app or something that's, you know, of an enterprise level that you're taking care of and you want to make sure that it can't be attacked, you can actually do a penetration test and see how solid it is. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions, but I wanted to let you know, here's my contact information for getting a hold of me at sales@ecots.com. Our phone number, we're on the different social media sites, and our phone number there at the left. And we are offering a free 30-minute security assessment. You just go ahead and send an email and we'll have a 30-minute questionnaire with you, and then we'll provide you with an assessment and our recommendations from that interview. With that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer, and just go ahead and use the chat or the question and answer. And we'll see if anybody has anything here. Let's see. So if there aren't any questions, that's fine. If you come up with a question, please send it to sales@ecots.com. I really appreciate your time. I hope this was of value to you. If there is, like I said, anything you'd like some clarification or recommendations on some of the platforms you should consider, please go ahead and send me a note at sales@ecots.com. What's included in the 30-minute assessment is being asked. So it will be a questionnaire. There's about 30 plus questions that will fall through a lot of the things we talked about in this webinar, that will give me an idea or us an idea of where you fall in the spectrum of kind of like from a 1 to 5. And then what I'll do is we'll assess it, and we'll get you back some feedback of where your vulnerabilities are from a high, medium, low, and maybe some recommendations that are obvious on where we think you should be putting some of your investment initially. A more thorough assessment is always recommended beyond that if it is more important to you, but this can give you a good starting point. Thanks for the question. Any other questions? Well, we will be making this webinar, this was recorded, so it'll be available for, and it will probably be posted on our site at some point, and we'll send a link to those who we have email addresses for from the invite. And feel free to share it with your staff, your constituents, your clients, your relationships. You guys all stay safe and healthy and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you very much for coming.